I like to solve problems through business, and that's my background. And so if I was able to take something like Tanzania, the problem of malnutrition, and the fact that I have kids too, and tie all those together and solve that problem of malnutrition through business, then that was, to me, the best way to kind of address a big problem.
What in your mind was the most important to start with? Which building block when you start?
Yeah, well, strangely, when I came back from East Africa, I had turned on 60 Minutes, and they were doing a story on plumpy nut. And I had just seen this in the field, and I thought the fact that I'm seeing this again, and that this really is a revolutionary product that exists, but there isn't enough access and there isn't enough availability to it in the developing world at the time. This was almost 10 years ago. And so that's kind of where I started, is like, okay, the answer is build a factory in Tanzania where we can create jobs locally, which solves one of the underwriting problems of poverty, right? But then, so that's addressing it from a long-term solution, and also the short-term solution, which is making sure that people have access to food and nutrition at the same time. So setting up a factory in Tanzania was what I thought would be the best first step. To me, the job creation piece was really huge when I was thinking about Tanzania. And then I realized we quickly went into the Great Recession in 2008 here in our own backyard in Rhode Island. And people were actually talking about job creation here. At the time, we ranked third in the US for the highest unemployment rates. So all of a sudden, right here in Rhode Island, it became an issue. And that creating a company, at the time I thought, oh, maybe we'd create 25 jobs. It all of a sudden became a big deal, which I thought was impossible. Back before these products existed, it was very logistically challenging and very expensive to be able to treat children with malnutrition. They had to come into the hospital and stay in the hospital to be treated. Most of the hospitals don't even have clean water accessible. So it's not only just at home, but in hospital environments, there aren't access to refrigeration and clean water. And you wonder how they're able to function. And so the creation of this was really revolutionary because it eliminated those prohibitors and allowed us to now reach some in the hardest to reach areas, far, far away from civilization a lot of the times. I feel really blessed to be able to witness this face to face, because then I can bring back that story and I can tell you what it looks like and what it feels like to be face to face with a mother and a child who are in desperate need of help. And maybe people who don't get that opportunity read the paper and say, I've heard this before. Isn't this problem going to be there next year? Isn't there something bigger that we can do? I mean, sometimes this is an effect of climate change. There isn't something that mother can do to prevent a drought from happening in that country. And she hasn't done anything wrong that has left her child in this life or death situation. And if you are faced, or anyone is faced with that, I know, because it's just basic humanity, that we would all do something about it.
Do you find that most kids are able to take it?
Yes. And if there is the rare one who can't, usually we find a little bit of water, and just a few sips of water will just be enough to let them be able to eat some of the plumpy nut.
And so the effects are how quick?
I mean, there's the immediate effects, just like if you were hungry and someone handed you food, right? The immediate effect is a smile, right? And just perking up a little bit. Sometimes we have kids who check out of the program too early because they feel like they're better that quickly, sometimes 3 weeks. It's really much more recommended to stay in for a full 7 to 8 weeks to make sure that you're fully rehabilitated. But the change happens so quickly that you really cannot even recognize the kids. So you see that immediate perking up and that immediate change in disposition. But then over time, obviously, they're building back their bodies. Their coloring comes back. Just their body mass starts to build back up.
What's your target age group?
Target age group is 6 months to 5 years. So we're really focused on those ages. And that's where we can make an impact. If someone is starving to death and it's after age 5, then yes, you can always make a hungry person not hungry. But the ability to change intellectual capacity, those opportunities are lost at that point.
Right. That we all know as parents ourselves.
Yeah, Right.
Those early intervention, you don't get those years and days back.
Right, and we're also trying to gain height as well. And so after a certain point, if someone's stunted, we can't correct that if we wait too long. It's important to be part of the community. I mean, we have groups that come in from Girl Scouts and kindergartners all the way to graduate students. And the fact that we have the opportunity to educate all these groups on what is outside of these borders, what's going on around the world, and teach them that it is possible to make big change and have ideas right here that can really help. We're currently working in 48 different countries from little Rhode Island. So I love that about what we do. Recently, I took my 15-year-old twins to Guatemala with me, and we had a long flight. We drove a couple hours, and then we hiked for a couple hours with Plumpy Nut in the backpack, up to 11,000 feet. We're all huffing and puffing. And what's at the end of this journey? One child, one 2-year-old, who was desperately in need of Plumpy Nut. She didn't even have the ability to walk. And when we finished that day, that was the only thing we did that day, was reach that one child. And I said to my girls, so, was it worth it? And they're like, absolutely, absolutely.